Psalms 33, we're going to look at verse 12 tonight. Don't forget our service Sunday at 10:45, morning worship. Ladies meeting tomorrow at 7 o'clock here at the church. All ladies are invited to come. Invite someone, bring your favorite finger food, and just have a great time. Next Wednesday night, we'll pick back up in our study, but I just felt like doing something different. Verse 12. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. The Lord looketh from heaven and beholdeth all the sons of men. From the place of his habitation he looketh upon all the inhabitants of the earth. He fashioneth their hearts alike, he considereth all their works. There is no king saved by the multitude of a host. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. A horse is a vain thing for safety, neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, and upon them that hope in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death, and to keep them alive in famine. Some of what I share tonight, some of you have heard before, but I believe some things are worth repeating, just as some things are worth remembering. Across our country today, there have been times of remembrance at what took place 18 years ago today. 18 years ago today, this is what transpired. At 8:45 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, en route from Boston's Logan Airport to Los Angeles International with 92 people on board, slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. At 9:03 a.m., approximately 18 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767, en route from Boston's Logan Airport to Los Angeles International, with 65 people on board, hits the South Tower of the World Trade Center. At 9:21 a.m., New York City Port Authority closes all bridges and tunnels in New York City. At 9:24 a.m., President Bush calls the plane crashes at the World Trade Center an apparent terrorism attack on our country. At 8:43, American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 en route from Dulles to LAX, with 58 passengers and 6 crew members, crashes into the Pentagon. One of the building's 5 sides collapses. At 9:32 a.m., the New York Stock Exchange closes trading. At 9:40 a.m., the FAA orders the entire nationwide air traffic system shut down and all flights at U.S. airports are stopped. At 9:45 a.m., the White House is evacuated. And at 10 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757 en route from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco with 38 passengers and 7 crew members, crashed just north of Somerset County Airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Shortly before impact, a passenger upon that flight calls on his cell phone from a locked bathroom, letting people know that they have been hijacked. There were rumors that the plane was headed to either the White House or the Capitol. At 10:05 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses in a pile of ashes and debris. At 10:24 a.m., the FAA reports that all inbound transatlantic flights are to be diverted to Canada. At 10:28 a.m., the World Trade Center North Tower collapses. At 11:26 p.m., 11:26 p.m., American Airlines expresses concern about the fate of another plane, Flight 157, a Boeing 767 bound from Boston to Los Angeles. At 12:15 p.m., the United States closes border crossings with Canada and with Mexico. Isn't that amazing? At 1:05 p.m., New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani orders an evacuation of Manhattan South of Canal Street. At 1:04 p.m., in a speech at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, President Bush announces that security measures have been taken and says, make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. At 1:44 p.m., the Navy dispatches aircraft carrier guided missile destroyers to New York and to Washington. Around the country, fighters, airborne radar, fuel planes began to scramble. The North American Aerospace Defense Command goes to its highest alert. At 1:44 p.m., President Bush leaves Barksdale Air Force Base for Nebraska's Offutt Air Force Base, home to the U.S. Strategic Air Command. At 4:30 p.m., President Bush leaves Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska for Washington. And at 4:45 p.m., the New York City announces that some 200 firefighters have been killed and 76 police officers are missing. Church, may we never forget. I have wept pretty much all day. I love our country, but I do not love what's happening to my country. At 5:25, give me just 1 second, please. Pushed the wrong button. Thank God for all this excitement. Yeah, give me just a second here and we'll get this all straightened out. I know you're all in a hurry. Just like the enemy wanting to fight what we're trying to do. Hello? Yeah. That's all right. You know what? I'm going to preach it anyway. There we go. We're back in business. Give me just a second. Can you say amen? All right. At 5:25 p.m., the 7 World Trade Center, a 47-story tower, collapses from damages that it received also from the attack. That day, some 2,973 people died, with another 24 people that, to my knowledge, to this day, many of them have not been found. What happened on that Tuesday morning was without question the most aggressive assault upon our country since Pearl Harbor. Until that Tuesday, the bloodiest day in the U.S. history was September 17, 1862, when some 4,700 Union and Confederate soldiers died at the Civil War Battle of Antietam. Pearl Harbor lost some 2,380 Americans, and the first day of Normandy invasion on June the 6th, 1944, killed some 1,465 people. From President Bush's address September the 11th to the nation, he says, and I quote, "Tonight I ask for your prayers for all of those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, and for all whose senses and safety and security have been threatened. And I pray that they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us through the ages of the scriptures that says in Psalms 23, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." That was then. That was 18 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. And I know that we say that we will never forget, and many have not forgotten, but I will tell you that I believe as a country, we have forgotten. Just like we have forgotten World War II, we have forgotten the Vietnam War, we have forgotten Pearl Harbor. We have forgotten the Holocaust. We feel like if it's out of sight, it's out of mind, but a lot of these things are not being taught today in our schools, and therefore you have a generation that knows nothing about it. That's what's happening today. Politicians have forgotten what happened 18 years ago. But I will tell you, the terrorists remember it well, and today they celebrate. And even today, the head of one of the terrorist organizations called for attacks against America. Church, we are still a hated country. But you know, back then, all you heard about on the news was what took place on 9/11. And even after the years following 9/11, the news on that anniversary date would focus solely on what happened on that day. I remember 2 or 3 years after 2001, some of the news media would show from the first plane hitting the tower, they would show the complete footage of the whole thing all day long. Today, I did not see that. I only saw on one news network where they were showing pictures of people reading the names of those that passed. And I made it a point to look. I wanted to look. And many times as I went through the news channels, you might have seen just a little picture that they would put up, something like this, but that was it. I was told even in the Lawton Constitution there was just a little bitty clip write-up about it. Why, church? Because we have forgotten what happened 18 years ago. It's not as important today as it was then. Politicians back then, I saw it, you saw it. Didn't matter if you was a Democrat or Republican or whoever, they stood arm in arm on the steps of the Capitol and they sang, "God bless America." We don't see that today. Back then there was patriotism. You were proud as an American. Men such as football player Tillman gave up a professional football career to go battle the enemy, and yet lost his life in friendly fire. People were proud of our country, proud of who they were. But yet today, we're so politically correct that we have nothing more than a generation of marshmallows. We don't have teenagers that are tough anymore. They could care less about the country. It's what this country can do for them. Back then we had respect for first responders. We were proud of our police department, of our fire department. We were proud of what they did. And today they're being doused with water, disrespected. And our government leaders, if they don't stand behind it, they have no business being a leader. It's pretty sad that our law enforcement can't even go out and eat somewhere without somebody spitting in their burger. I'm sorry, but I feel this. Churches then began to fill up. I remember, some of you were there. I was an associate with Calvary, and this is nothing against Calvary. But I saw our numbers, and those of you that were there, we got to where we were running over 200 people. And today, and it's no disrespect to Pastor Elmore, they probably are doing about as good as we are. Why? Because back then, Christians got scared. Backsliders come home. People got tired of playing games with God. And today, you can't even draw people. You can't do anything anymore to draw people to God's house. People don't want God, even in the church. We've let this world pull us so far away from God, we don't even realize how far we are from God. Yes, sir. As a country, I'm afraid we have forgotten what happened 18 years ago. But we have the question. It was asked then and it's asked today. You see, we deal with tragedies all through life. Bahamas are picking up from the hurricane. Alaska burning in wildfires. things happening throughout our world. And we want to know, if there is such a God, then why is this stuff happening? Hello? Why did God step back and allow 9/11 to happen? Why did he allow the Bahamas to get nearly blown off the map? Well, I'm going to answer some of that tonight. You want to know where God is in your hour of tragedy? You want to know where God is in your hour of pain? You want to know where God was at on 9/11? I'll tell you where he was at. He was at the same place he was when Adam and Eve sinned against him. When Adam and Eve rebelled in sin, he was waiting, my friend, to cover up their sin. Where was God, church, when Satan reared his ugly head and tempted God's first creation? Where was God as they defiled his word and rebelled against him? Was God not big enough to stop it? Hello? Talk to me now. I'm not mad. I'm just wound up. Church, it's not a matter of whether or not he could have stopped it. It's a matter of his design for humanity and his plan of redemption. He designed man with a freedom of choice. And in his sovereign foreknowledge, he made provision before the world was ever created for man's redemption, knowing full well that man was going to make a mess of his life and make some bad choices from the very beginning. But when Adam and Eve finally fessed up, it was God who went and provided the ultimate punishment to an innocent lamb. Took that lamb's life and shed that lamb's blood to cover up the nakedness of that man and woman. But God was there. God was at the same place on 9/11 as he was when Noah built the ark, protecting him from a disaster. What is sad, church, is man's rebellion did not end with Adam and Eve. Their sons and their sons' sons of every generation followed in their rebellious path until there was such a time on this world that the wickedness of man was nothing more than a stench in the nostrils of a holy God. And yet in the midst of all the ungodliness, my Bible says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. He was a man, though was not perfect, but he was righteous, and he faithfully proclaimed the righteousness of God. And when God, grieved by man's rebellion, determined to wipe man from the face of the earth, he made a choice to spare Noah and his family, my friend, and use them to repopulate this planet. So in mankind's natural disaster, God was on his throne. When the water was coming down, when the flood was taking place, God was right there watching what was happening. And yes, sir, he could have stopped it. He was at the same place he was when Job lost everything he had. He lost everything but a nagging wife, proving himself to God despite his circumstances. Church, just as Noah's generation experiences earth's disasters, natural disasters, Job, my friend, lived on a world at a time where there was also disasters. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, he knew what it was to see a storm. He knew what it was to experience a tornado. He knew what it was to experience disaster, ladies and gentlemen. And yet we see a man who is godly, a man who is loving God in the midst of everything else that may be going wrong. He, ladies and gentlemen, he is standing for the Almighty. He is being blameless and upright. Job was not immune to problems. There was evil in his day just like our day. People willing to kill and to steal to get what they wanted. And he even became a target to Satan. And as a result, Job lost everything he had, even his children. Friend, where was God? Listen, where was God? Had God turned his back on Job? Would Job return the favor by turning his back on God? No, church, 100 times no. God had not deserted Job, and Job would not curse God, even though he was urged to by his wife, ladies and gentlemen. He knew exactly the kind of God he served. And I ask you, where was God when all this was happening? Where was God when Job was losing it all? Where was God when he lost his children? Where was God when the boils on his flesh were so bad he would have to take rocks and cut the boils and let the pus run out and have the dogs lick the sores so it would ease the pain? Where was God in all of this? He was right there where he's always been. Job maintained his integrity, and he recognized that God was God. The Lord liveth, the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away, but blessed be the name of the Lord. Friend, let me tell you something. It's good to praise God on the good days. But when all hell has come against you and you think you've lost everything, go ahead and lift a hand toward heaven and give God praise anyway, because he's still there. Can somebody say amen? On this day, I want to remind you, as we remember 18 years ago what happened, I want to remind you there is evil on this planet. There is sin. There is sickness. There is heartache. And there is death. Good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to good people. And yes, sir, bad things happen to followers of Jesus Christ. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, Christians suffer from cancer, from diabetes, from divorce, from job loss, from loss of wealth, from loneliness. My friend, they suffer from floods and hurricanes, even terrorist attack. Where was God on this day? He was at the same place he was when Joseph was in the jail rotting, ladies and gentlemen. He was there perfecting the will of God, not only for his servant, but he was doing what he wanted to be done. Friend, God is God, and God chooses the shots, not you or not me. We could go on with all these experiences. We could talk about Moses. Where was God when Moses was on the backside of the desert being prepared for a greater service? Where was God when Samson is groping in darkness, being strengthened in his hour of weakness? Where was God when Jonah was swallowed by a fish, learning that God's way is the best way? Where was Daniel where was God when Daniel was thrown in the lion's den? I'll tell you where he was at. He made sure that Daniel had a lion skin rug there to keep him warm. Ladies and gentlemen, where was God when Peter and John were beaten for preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, but they were even given greater opportunities to share the good news of Jesus? Where was God when Paul was being stoned and shipwrecked and in prison? Ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you where he was. He was ensuring that all things work together for the good of them who love God according to his purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the greatest tragedies we find, the greatest tragedies, is when Jesus Christ hung on the cross. Where was his Father? Where was God? The same place, church, when Jesus was enduring pain and he had been beaten unmercifully, his body ripped to shreds, that pulled the whiskers from his face, that hit him with a rod, that spit upon him. They nailed him there to a cross. Where was God when his son was dying? Didn't God know? Church, couldn't God have prevented it? Could God have stopped it? Was he helpless? Was he not aware? Did he care? Church, of course he knew. Of course he could have prevented it. Yes, he could have stopped it. He wasn't helpless. He was aware. He cared. God knew what was happening, and God could have stopped it, but he did not. Why? Because God had a larger picture. You see, church, our problem is we can only see here. You ever had one of those tubes that they put wrapping paper around, or paper towels? You know how it is. You walk around with that thing looking through it till somebody walks up, bops the other end, and knocks your eye out. But that's how it is. Life is like looking through that tube. All we see is what's the end of that tube. We don't see the whole picture that God's working out. And all that we face, my God knows why and he knows how. He says in Isaiah 55:8, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Listen to me, church. Though God was near his son while he hung on the cross, there was a moment there in time where he turned his back on his son, because upon his son was being laid the sins of the world. And Jesus looked up and said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why did God do that, church? I'll tell you why. Our God is a holy God. God cannot and will not tolerate sin, and sin must be judged. Did God turn his back on America on 9/11? If so, was it because of our nation's sins? Will he turn his back again? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you right now, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And there's another scripture that says you reap what you sow. And if we're going to sow away from God and tell God we want nothing to do with him, then we better get ready to pay the consequences somewhere down the road. The story is told of Al Bowrack. He worked on the 105th floor of Tower 1. When he realized they were trapped in the building and would be unable to escape, it is reported that Al shared the gospel with 50 of his co-workers and led them in prayer. And many, I believe, no doubt, got right with God. But I also wonder how many of those individuals may at one time laughed at him and mocked him, made fun of his religion and his God. You see, church, on 9/12, many of us changed our tune, and we began to tell people about Jesus. When was the last time you told somebody about Jesus? When was the last time you prayed somebody through to salvation? On 9/12, we were all Americans. We had received a wake-up call. I'm afraid we've gone back to sleep again. And what's it going to take to stir us up again, huh? On 9/12, we stopped wasting so much money on things of this life. We began giving more to other people. But today we are spending ourselves into oblivion, and we're wrecking our children's future in the process because we're giving them stuff, not what they need. What they need is an experience with God and a walk with God. They need a grandpa and a grandma that'll set an example before them of what it is to be a godly man and woman. We forget so quickly, and we return back to 9/10, and we live in that mentality as if we've got forever. Well, guess what? We don't have forever. Because on that day, when they got on those planes, and they said goodbye to their families, and they went up those elevators and got off those floors to begin their work, little did they know that was the last sunrise they would ever see. Doesn't matter who you are, church. Boone Pickens, come on, hey. Doesn't matter how much money you have. Doesn't matter what your name is on. Don't know what kind of life he lived, but I'll tell you one thing. When he woke up this morning, he probably did not realize that was his last sunrise to ever see this side of eternity. And I'm not judging anybody. God knows my heart. I was in church. 9/11 happened on a Tuesday. I was in church on a Wednesday. I was pastoring. I wasn't in Hartsville. I was still over at Calvary, I believe it was. Record number went to church that following Sunday. For a couple of weeks, our attendance began to grow. I talked to you a while ago about that. But little by little, we watched it begin to fall off. I've watched our attendance during my 14-year tenure here, we have probably had as many as 140 or a little bit more. Sunday morning, maybe now we're 80, if we're lucky. A lot of the same people are still around. They're just not going to church anywhere. And here's something else I learned. And God knows my heart, what I'm about to say. We learned that Islam is not just another denomination. Islam is not like the Methodists or the Baptist or any other church movement. Friend, just because they worship one God does not mean it's the same God we worship. And I don't know if you've seen this on social media. One of our missionary wives put it on her Facebook, and I shared it on mine. But there is a billboard in Oklahoma City off I-35, northbound east, between Southeast 51st and Southeast 44th. And it's a red and white and blue billboard. On one half, it's blue, and it says, one family, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. One message, Islam. There are over 30 people right now in America running for offices that are Muslim. I'm not going to stand here and say all Muslims are bad, but I do know this, that Islam teaching is against Christianity. And America has embraced it. What they believe goes completely against our Constitution. And if they have their way and bring a Sharia law, watch out, friend. But there are some communities in some of our bigger cities that are completely populated by Muslim and Islam people. And I'm not against, God knows my heart, church. We need to pray for everybody. But they have an agenda, and the church better wake up and do her agenda. Because they're not afraid to talk about their God. Although everyone has the freedom to worship as they see fit, I do not have to, and I will not accept any God other than Jehovah God. As Christians and Americans, we need to remember that our security goes beyond the measure of our homeland defense. Our security is beyond metal detectors. Our security is beyond checkpoints and our military power. Ladies and gentlemen, it is more than our economy and the strength of our money. Our faith and our safety must rest in the one true and living God. Security is not the absence of trouble, but it is the presence of God and the confidence and the courage He gives us in the midst of our trouble. No, friend, God is not all far somewhere, but He's a very present help in the time of need. Billy Graham's daughter, Ann Graham, I believe she's passed away just a few months ago, was being interviewed shortly after the attack on 9/11. And the interviewer, Jane Clayson, asked her, how could God let something like this happen? And here's what she said. She said, I believe that God is deeply saddened by this, just as we all are. She said, but for years we've been telling God to get out of our schools. We've been telling God to get out of our government and to get out of our lives. And being the God He is, I believe that God has calmly backed out. She said, how can we expect God to give us His blessing and His protection if we demand that He leave us alone? Powerful, church. Shortly after the attack, Reverend Tony Evans, pastors in Dallas, made the following comparison. He said, on September the 11th, 2001, an unknown enemy attacked us at the heart. He said, think of it. He said, think of how well it was planned. He said this attack was not just thrown together. He said they attacked us on 9/11. 911 is an emergency number to us. We found ourselves as a nation in an emergency situation. He said they chose two airlines, American and United. They attacked America to destroy our unity. They came against our wealth. They attacked what stood for our economic power, the Twin Towers. There has never been a society as rich as America. Even if you're poor, you're rich compared to the rest of the world. Wall Street was shut down. Those towers that represented our wealth and riches, he said, did you see how fast they fell? He said they came against our strength. They attacked the Pentagon, our military might, right in the middle. It's as if they were saying, we're going to demonstrate to you, the richest country in the world, to the strongest country in the world, you ain't as bad as you think you are. We're going to come to right where you live, and we're going to control your media. All they're going to talk about is us. We're going to hijack your planes. We're going to shut down your airports. Thousands are going to die, and we're going to affect the way you live. And let me tell you, friend, from that day until now, our country has never been the same. What's the point, Pastor? Psalms 127, verse 1. Except the Lord build the house, the labor is in vain that keepeth it. And except the Lord keepeth the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. You see, church, I believe what that says is this. If God's not watching over you, it doesn't matter how big your army is. Doesn't matter how much money you have. When you lose and leave your faith in God, you lose and leave your help from God. And what we need to remember is having twin towers are not enough. Having a Pentagon is not enough. Having money is not enough. We better have someone we cannot see, watching enemies we cannot see in order to deal with what we can see. And this is not only true for our nation, it's true for our lives. This enemy is coming against us. You see, one day your money, your security, your health, none of that's going to be worth anything. The bottom line is, how are you going to deal with God? Doesn't matter how many locks you put on your doors. Doesn't matter how many windows you lock, how much money's in your pocket, how much stuff you have. If you leave out God, friend, you're going to be in trouble. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he has chosen for his inheritance. I don't know about you, church, but I want to be blessed by God. I want our church blessed by God. I want your families blessed by God. Last night, a 30-year-old young man, Jared Wilson, preacher of a mega church in California, had dealt with depression all of his life, started an outreach ministry for those that dealt with depression. But last night he took his life. He just couldn't deal with it. And let me say this. Friend, if you are dealing with depression, for the love of God, talk to somebody. Talk to me. If you want to talk to me, talk to my wife. Talk to somebody. I know we all deal with life. We deal with it in various stages and various ways. And there's things happen I don't understand. But what I don't understand, I leave in the hands of God, and I keep going on. I'm curious to see what happens in the morning with me, okay? With me. Went Monday to the dentist. They took x-rays and they cleaned my teeth and all that. Well, from that day until today, I cannot clench my jaw. I'm in pain. And I have to feel like it was part of an attack to keep me from doing what I just got through doing tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, this country needs prayer. Our president, whether you like him or not, he is the president and you should be praying for him. Our city officials, they need your prayers. Our first responders, Andy, Stan, Andrew, stand. If you're a first responder, these men need your prayers. Amen. And what are you doing holding my grandbaby? And we're going to talk about that too. But I've unburdened my heart to you. You got go ahead and sit down, Andy. We've seen Cara enough. But I wanted to just unburden my heart to you today. I'm proud. I'm an American Indian. You don't fool with an American Indian. Especially an American Indian that is a Christian pastor. We got all kind of spirits we can use. But I love you. And I just wanted to remind you, in the midst of all your turmoil, God's still there. He's never left. Oh, we've left you. We've shook our fist in your face as a country, and we've destroyed your laws. We've pulled down your monuments because we don't want you around. But God, I want to tell you, this group here wants you around. We need you, Lord. Our children, our grandchildren, they need you desperately, Lord. If they're not saved, they're going to hell. There's no two ways around it. My God, help us. Help us to remember. Help us to remember. I want to open these altars, and Craig will be receiving offering at the end like he always does. But church, I just want us to come pray. Look how far we've come in 18 years. I don't know what God may allow to happen. I don't know. I fear for our country. I really do. I fear for what could happen. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. But I want to give you a chance just to thank the Lord. One, because he's still there. In your hour of need, he's there. And this week, why don't you just thank a first responder? Whether it's in our church or outside these walls. Whether it's military, it doesn't matter. These men and women that serve, they serve to protect. And many gave their life doing what they were called to do. Don't forget the service Sunday, but right now, Andrew, if you could put some nice worship music on, and let's just talk to God for a little while. Can we do that?